Well, Hong Kong protesters hitting the streets yet again today as big-name brands in the United States are getting hit for not strongly supporting the pro-democracy demonstrators over China's communist government. They're in a can't-win situation. The Heritage Foundation's Dean Cheng on all of this. Dean, very good to have you. A lot of the companies that are caught, straddling on this issue can't win for either their U.S. customers or their China business. We've seen in the case of the NBA, we've seen in the case of Blizzard, the big game maker, over this one gamer who dared to, speak out in support of the protesters, and on and on. Where is this going?
Well, there's a couple of things at work here. On the Chinese side, they're consistent and predictable. They have a very clear message. You cannot say anything positive about the Hong Kong protesters. You certainly can't say anything positive about Taiwan. If you do, you will be punished in the Chinese market. The American side is much more, frankly, bizarre. I mean, what we're seeing is an MBA that apparently is willing to pull out of Charlotte because of the issue of transgender bathrooms. You have to wonder whether the Chinese have upheld transgender bathrooms at all of the MBA facilities.
Well, they do look, to your point, very wormy, and I couldn't believe the degree they dug in on their worminess. So I'm wondering if China, in the end, certainly has their number, certainly has U.S. business interest number, so they can go ahead and make a deal to buy more agricultural items. They can go ahead and make a deal on some of these other things the president lauded, and properly so. But when it comes to understanding their influence over American business, they're quite astute at that, aren't they?
Absolutely. And it doesn't hurt that American businesses not only cooperate, but in some cases have a double standard that hurts the United States. I mean, you don't see Apple or Google apparently having much problem working with the Chinese, but they won't work with the U.S. Department of Defense to help defend the very country that allows them to have the opportunities to create the products that they do.
So when we get to the next levels of this, I guess this is phase one of this particular trade deal. I don't want to go too far afield, but is it your sense that the Chinese are now thinking, all right, no one is using our treatment of the Hong Kong protesters as a trade bargaining chip, so we don't have anything to worry about. We just dodge that.
Well, this is the 30th anniversary of Tiananmen,
right.
And I think the Chinese are very much aware that whether it's an explicit item or not, there are certain lines that if they do cross could have very serious consequences. The sanctions imposed after Tiananmen are still in place. I think that's an important factor for Xi Jinping as he thinks about how to deal with
I understand,
yet
but if you
week.
think about it, they have not exactly been held back to become the economic global juggernaut they are, even with that 30 years later, right? So they might be weighing that and saying, well, we can deal with this.
They might, but on the other hand, so far we haven't seen really sort of the blatant show of force, which has been a real fear about what might happen in Hong Kong.
How do you think that is resolved then, Dean? I mean, I had a dissident, a woman who was through the Tiananmen Square massacre, survived it herself, but said at its core, she thinks China is a military brute and that it will happen again. And when push comes to shove, has no problem pushing those protesters right off the face of the earth. She's convinced of it. Now, of course, she's been burned by the Tiananmen thing, all his friends and relatives. But that's her view. What do you think?
I think that if Xi Jinping thinks that it's a choice between rolling the tanks down Queen's Road or keeping the party in power, that's not even a question. The party needs to stay in power in his view. But up until that point, if they can do a lower visibility, targeted arrest of key leaders and people like that, shut down global media coverage, that I think is their first choice.
Dean Cheng, thank you very much for taking the time. I appreciate it.